You're listening to Walk It Out with Tricia Goyer, where we discover what it looks like to follow God and be swept away on the journey of a lifetime. Author of over 70 books, mom of 10, yes, 10, homeschooler and speaker, Tricia Goyer will explore what radical obedience to God's word looks like. It's time to hear from God lovers who've dared to say yes. Listen in to heart chats and learn how others overcame doubts and fears. Discover how God used ordinary people to impact others one step at a time. If you're ready to get radical, get going, and make a difference in this world, you're at the right place. Here's your host, prolific writer, world traveler, people lover, and mega nap taker, Tricia Goyer.
I am so glad that we are going to have this conversation on Walk It Out today. I know so many of you have been talking about it on Instagram and on Facebook, just the challenges of dealing with the kids and all their feelings happening right now. So we still have 5 at home that we're homeschooling, and some days we are doing great. Some days we are having hard days, but we really need to use this time to help our kids deal with their emotions and in turn help ourselves, because sometimes when we're a little stressed, it gets our kids very stressed. So I'm very excited about our guest today. Josh and Christi Straub are speakers, authors, marriage and family coaches. They're co-hosts of the Famous at Home podcast. They also have books called Safe House: How Emotional Safety is the Key to Raising Kids Who Live, Love, and Lead Well. Josh and Christi have 2 fun-loving kids, Landon and Kennedy, and a dog named Cooper, and a baby on the way. So we're going to have to talk about all these things. Welcome, Dr. Josh and Christi.
Thank you so much for having us.
This is fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tricia.
Okay, so baby on the way, kids at home, homeschooling. How are you guys doing during this time?
It does like the whole barefoot and pregnant thing, it really is like, homeschooling while working from home, while not having any breaks. Like it really starts to feel like pioneer days-ish, actually. Minus grocery delivery. That it didn't happen, I'm sure, back then. But
Josh has been going out hunting and
no, but we're actually, this has been a sweet season for us. We are about to welcome a baby literally in the next couple weeks. So that's a whole other added, truly a joy, but also it's, a stressor in this climate that we're in right now. With 2 kids at home, one we were actually already homeschooling, one is now new to this world. But we have been, I think, we kind of joke because we do work together and we do work from home, and we were homeschooling one. So we joke, we're like, we have trained for this. We are prepared. This is our time to shine. And shine maybe, some days, and maybe fall flat on our face and in tears the next. So that's about how we're doing.
Well, I am so glad that you're talking, sharing that, because, we're thinking, okay, you guys know all about emotions and feelings. You should have it all figured out. And I think, and again, I'm a homeschooling mom. I've homeschooled for 25 years. So it's not new to us. We're used to being home. I work from home. My husband's in the cloud web security, but he works from home. So I was thinking we should not have a problem at all. Mm-hmm. And there are some days like we just have really hard days. The kids are missing their friends. Our little guy was supposed to be doing his baseball season. And so it makes me feel better as a homeschooling mom who's struggling to hear that, everybody is struggling, even the people that seem like, okay, they should totally have their act together right now and be doing completely fine.
I think the only grace, for at least for me, I feel like in this season, has been really low expectations. Mm-hmm. And I mean that. I am a type A achiever by nature, and that has not bode well. And it certainly hasn't in this season. And so it has literally been by the grace of God, who has just, I feel like it's been a clean out season. And he has honestly been remaking me into a softer, I think, less achievement oriented version of myself, where grace is at the forefront. And so I hope that's what has been felt more in our home than ever. Mm. Some days it does feel like just a lot of emotion, and from me, from them, from the kids, from in marriage, it's sort of a pressure cooker. And what we've noticed, and, just even working with families, just the pleasure and just joy we get to do that and walk alongside so many families, is you see this season really has exposed the foundations that were already there,
Right.
It exposed the cracks and the crevices and that might have been there for decades. And it's just exposing those, or it's exposed where there has been a really solid foundation built, not perfect, not by any means, any of us, but where it's sort of allowed a season of restoration and healing and connection. So it's been I think all of us can sort of identify with, on one end of the spectrum or the other, and probably both, going back and forth between the two. But it has certainly, I just think, been an exposing season. And I think God's absolutely at the helm, getting all the glory for it.
Oh, I love that. And what I just hear is just giving ourselves grace during this time. And I am right there. I'm totally type A. I would have the 15-minute schedule figured out for all the kids and what they should be doing. And no one needs that at all right now. And they're crafting and making stuff and making huge messes. And I'm like, okay, it's okay, because no one is coming over. No one is going to see all the perler beads and Play-Doh on my dining room floor right now. It's okay.
And isn't that like, somehow I think that's where this season has been sweet. Like, you'll see, like, I just feel like people, all the pretense and all the polish has been dropped. And you get to see people's like actual real life. Like, it gives me such pleasure to watch people walking around the neighborhood in their like pajamas and running shoes. Like,
yeah,
I just think we're all at the place where like, we've just stopped trying to impress anybody right now. And I think it's just where we should all live. I just love it.
And it's leveled the playing field, really. And direct this to Josh. I mean, I just love seeing like Jimmy Fallon on there with his kids, like poking his head as he's like trying to share a joke. I mean, don't you think that, even now, people are just really having to say, okay, this is our real life, even though we're professionals. There's a lot going on that we have to be real to be able to get through this season.
Absolutely. And I think what it does too is it exposes exactly what Christi said. It exposes the cracks in a way of you see Jimmy Fallon as a real husband, as a real dad. You get to see the behind the scenes, and you get to see that he's a good husband, and you get to see that he's a good dad, and that his wife is filming and everything. I just think it brings reality to what we can see as, what Christi said earlier. The grace. It just plays all into that whole concept that it's easy to compare ourselves to other people and to look at other people's worlds and think that they have it together, when the reality is we're all human and we're all trying to do this thing called life. And we're all, trying to maintain what, the stage that God's given us. And we're also trying to do the best that we can at home as well. And I just think it's really neat. As Christi said, one of the biggest things we have seen is it's almost like two extremes. We've seen families either thriving, or we have seen families who are really not doing all that great. And I'm sure obviously there's a lot of the in between, but it's this type of season that when you start to slow down and you don't allow extracurricular activities and you don't have all these other things that you normally said yes to getting in the way, now you're sitting and you're looking at each other as a family and going, who are we? And for us, we believe that's just a beautiful place to be, because you're going to end up there one way or another. And what this is doing is it's putting us all there. And I just think that's a beautiful place to be in.
Yeah, I love that. And I really think of this time, I've chosen to think of it as a gift that we have all this extra time. And so I've taught my girls how to sew. We made aprons the other day. I had a sewing machine that I had bought like 2 years ago, never got it out of the box because it was just one of those things like, I want to do this, and never got around. We pulled it out. We made aprons. We've been baking. We've been going on family walks and bike rides. And I've always been one that's tried not to schedule too much. We only let kids do one activity per year, so we try to protect that anyway. But this time we just seeing it as a gift has really made us see like we can enjoy this time together. I have a 17-year-old in the house. She's going to be leaving soon. I do need to teach her how to cook and how to sew and how to do all these things. So really just how we view this time is helpful, but there are still those days when they're missing out, or we've had a birthday party where her friends didn't get to come. There's all the feelings, which I'm so thankful for your book, What Am I Feeling? And the feeling chart. And one of the cool things is after we adopted kids and we started going to therapy, this is usually one of the things that the therapist worked on is teaching them their emotions. And I didn't even understand like how big of a thing was, but like one of our little girls, she was 5 and we first brought her home and she would get hurt like a skinned knee and she would get angry and she would throw things and hit people and be screaming and I didn't understand. And the therapist says, you don't know what happened to her in her biological family if she got hurt. Maybe people laughed at her. Maybe people, hurt her because she was bothering them. And I think that's an extreme case, but so many times we just expect kids to know their emotions and know what flippy in the tummy means, which is so funny because I've read this book probably 3 times to my kids. And so my daughter, 12-year-old, was going around, I feel flippy in my tummy.
That's amazing.
She brought it from the book. But, so many times we just expect like kids should know what they're feeling and they should know what emotions are. And no, it's like, and often adults don't know. So just talk a little bit about your book and why you felt this was so important for families.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your own journey with your kiddos. What neat stories. And, for me, so I wrote Safe House, how emotional safety is the key to raising kids who live, love, and lead well. I wrote that book a number of years ago, realizing that parenting was very difficult. And there were a lot of people a lot of experts, so to speak, and I put experts in air quotes, that, you were getting a lot of conflicting information. And as if parenting wasn't hard enough, it was like, how can we distill this down? Not that we're going to make parenting any easier, but could it be simpler? Could it be simpler than, because you think about everything that's thrown at you from, you can't even leave the hospital before you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to immunize your children. Then you have, should we breastfeed or bottle feed, spank or not spank, time ins or time outs, because time outs, we're supposed to be doing time ins today, not time outs. Should we co-sleep, not co-sleep? And I haven't even gotten into BPA-free products, gluten-free diets, the whole nine. Like it's so stressful to be a parent and all the decisions we had to make. And so I took a step back and I said, what if we started to look as 90-year-old grandparents, maybe even great-grandparents by that time, and we look back at the generation, what would have really mattered in our kids? What would have made the difference? And I started there, and I started thinking, what are the outcomes? What do I truly desire my children to become as they're adults? I want them to respect authority. I want them to, have a marriage that they love and enjoy. I want them to have a career that they thrive in. I want them to, all of these things. And I want them to love God. I want them to have a faith that sticks, that's genuine. And every single major outcome that I desired in my kids linked back to one particular factor, and that was emotional safety. That the environment that we raised our kids in, if we could just raise our kids in an emotionally safe environment, that was linked to all these major outcomes. And there's a lot of reasons why that I go into in the book Safe House, and a lot of reasons why that is neurobiologically, the way God desired and wired our brains. But also if you look at like Proverbs 22:6, the verse, it says to raise a child in the way that he or she should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. Well, that verse is a proverb. It's not a promise, which is one thing we need to pay attention to. But even more than that, it's about the environment we raise our kids in. It's right. If our kids feel safe, it's going to be an environment that if they do walk away, they're going to want to come back to. That when they're old, they're not going to want to leave. They're going to want to come back. And if we can create that type of an environment, these are the things research shows are linked to all these outcomes. But then when you filter it through the lens of the Bible, you go, oh my goodness, this is exactly the way God the Father treats us as his children. And so we thought, okay, we looked at this and we said, okay, how can we get this into the hands of parents in a practical way that's not just a parenting book, but because a lot of parents want to say, hey, what can I do with my kids? What's a practical strategy I can do today? And one of the most practical strategies we can teach our kids from the very beginning of life is to label their feelings, to label their emotions, to put words to what it is they're feeling. And that's what am I feeling is all about. It's a story of Sam and his feelings of anxiety. And he goes to school that day and he encounters a number of different friends who are experiencing a number of different emotions. And the goal really of the book is to put a tool in the hand of a parent to get them to be able to sit down with their kids, to teach their kids what it is that they're feeling, to label their emotion. And there's a feelings chart in the back of the book, so you can pull the feelings chart out. And there's a poster, and it's perforated. They can hang it on their wall or the refrigerator or somewhere, and point to what they're feeling each day. And what we found is that it's got this double whammy effect, because it's not just good for the kids to start labeling their emotions; it's also good for the parents too. So it was a great tool to put in parents' hands to really show them what emotional safety is, to do emotional safety with their kids without having to spend 256 pages or whatever it was describing why it's important and how to do it. It's a simple tool to be able to just do it.
Yeah, and the book takes 5 minutes, maybe 7 to read it. They have to stop and look at the puppy and all the things. But I love that by the end, we unfolded the poster. In fact, one of the kids said, "Can we put this on the wall?" And I'm like, "Yes, we can take this out and put it on the wall," so that during our homeschool day or during the day, during breakfast, whenever, we can say, "How are you feeling today?" And some of our kids are having good days, some are having hard days, and it's so good to be able to bring up that conversation of what's really going on. And I love what you said about the Proverbs 22:6, and that I was just studying this last week in my personal Bible study, that when it says train up a child, it's actually giving them a taste for what life should be like. And I love that we're giving them a taste of how to be emotionally aware, how to have conversations, how to feel safe in our home. And all these little ding, ding, dings are going off in my head as you're telling this, because it seems like it's the same thing that God has been speaking to me about my own kids. So I just love that all that has been able to sum up in this sweet little storybook that we can just pull out. Like I said, I pulled it out 3 different times over the last month and read it to my kids, and they love the story. Even the 17-year-old, we're all doing homeschool together. We all do Bible study together. They, no one has complained. Everyone loves sharing about their feelings. And I think it's just important to let them know that it's okay. And we can pause and really figure out what is going on inside us.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the pause to figure out what's actually going on. Like, that's what, as adults, we don't do well. I mean, if we're honest, especially in this season, I think that's what we've talked to so many people where you realize, we're in what I think justifiably should be called a crisis, because it's been put on all of us. It's literally affected not just our country, it's affected the whole world. And it's confusing. It's novel because it's never been done before. This is no one knows what to expect, when it's going to end. And all of those feelings, that's a really confusing, scary, frustrating, anger producing place to be. It's like all the stages of grief that you're kind of experiencing at the same time. Kids missing out on stuff. We're missing out on stuff. We're having to say goodbye to things without any warning. It's just a mixed bag of a lot of stuff that so often we have been trained, and especially as adults, to shut down emotion. We just, you ask, Trisha, how are you doing? We're good. Good is not a feeling. Good is not an emotion. Nor is busy, nor is, life is full. Are the answers that we often give. We're never actually communicating how we're feeling. And so often we've learned to just numb out feeling. We've learned to just survive and sort of stuff that sort of down in the basement, really. And it's stay down there, be quiet, because I have to appear like I have it together, that I have. And yet the emotions that we often, suppress or numb is another good way to say it. Those are the ones that actually have the most power over us. And so, we talk about emotional safety. It's really teaching not just our kids, but us too, that to be emotionally healthy is to be able to experience the whole range of emotion. And that's from, those emotions that we would typically label positive, the ones that we like and the ones that we like to see in our kids and in our home and in our husband. And we like those. We like how they feel. But also, and equally important, is the ability to experience the typically labeled negative ones, the fear, anger, sadness, the ones that we just don't like. And so often we were raised in a home maybe that some of those emotions weren't allowed, or they were punished or minimized, dismissed. And it's just all ways that we have been taught to deal with emotion, or we maybe don't even realize that's the way we were kind of trained to deal with emotion. And so this is sort of, we hope, a way for people to relearn that emotion doesn't have to be, it's not a fearful thing, and nor do you have to fix it. I think that's the next part, is like, then people think your kid, presents something to you and it's like, oh gosh, I have to fix this. Like, I don't know. How do I make you not sad? How do I make you not angry? Like, I don't know. And that's not our job. And we just get to be heard, and we get to listen without expectation. And that's part of the emotional health journey, is just to be able to share it without anyone needing to fix it. And just that freedom to, like Josh said, to communicate. So to be able to put language to that confusing, mixed bag of emotion that's kind of going on inside, it heals the brain, actually.
Friends, if your home is like mine, there might be a lot of emotions happening right now. And I have learned from going to therapy with my kids that one of the best ways for kids to deal with their emotions are to write it down. When they can even write down, I am upset or anxious or sad, it moves it from their emotional part of their brain to their thinking part of the brain, and it helps them so much. It really brings emotional stability. Even though they're having those hard emotions, it brings emotional stability to them. So I created for my own kids my stay home journals. Now, they are sweet journals with these fun, colorful covers. And really, the whole point is getting kids to write down their emotions. So it has the date, what's happening that day, and how they're feeling that day. Now, because I have kids that like many different animals, there are many different covers. There is turtle and fancy kitty. There's a goat, there's a narwhal, there's a llama, there's 2 corgi covers because I have a child who is obsessed with corgis. Now, you can find all of these in a link in the show notes, or just go to Amazon and put in Stay Home Journals Trisha Goyer. They'll pop up. You can see the whole series of 25 different stay home journals that you can use for your kids. They're full color inside. They really are something that you can keep as a keepsake. That's why I did them full color, so kids can write at them. They could remember what's happening during this time. They could learn how to process their emotions. And because I'm a homeschooling mom, bonus, they are getting writing practice. So I hope you will enjoy the stay home journals. Again, just go to Amazon.com and put in Stay Home Journals Trisha Goyer, and you're going to have fun searching through all the covers and trying to pick out the best ones for your kids. And I love how you're saying we don't need to fix it. I just want to pause on that real quick, because I think so many times we're like, okay, we need to come up with an answer. And we just had, a conversation with one of our kids, and she was upset, and she's 17 and she can't do driver's ed and all the things that she had hoped for to be doing right now. And I'm like, that really stinks right now. And I know you had plans, for your spring, and you wanted to get a job this summer. And, it really just makes us sad to think about that. And I was just a couple days ago, was really just having a hard day, just like slogging through. And I realized like 3 of the conferences that I was supposed to speak at got canceled. And so I missed, we're looking forward all year to see the other speakers, because we kind of like go off and do dinner or, hang out. So my kids go to these homeschool conferences and they hang out with the other kids, and I'm realizing like, this is what I'm feeling like down about, is like we were supposed to be driving to this conference, this weekend and prepping for it. And I just realized like, it's okay. Like, and I just went and laid and read a novel. Like, I have all this stuff I could be doing, but let me just, read a couple chapters of a novel and just let myself be okay, not not trying to make myself happy, but just understanding like this is what is getting me down. And later that day, it was just, I think, a gift from God. One of the conference directors from a different conference called and like, we're still wanting to do a conference. We're probably going to push it back. And just hearing her voice and like, these people are still out there and they're all of us are thinking about the conferences and wanting to get together. It just like lifted me up to know there's other people thinking about it. But I think so many times, like we think we need to like all of a sudden act happy for our kids and, push that to the side. Or when our daughter's like, feeling down saying, well, the bright side is we're not sick and, whatever. We had this great pizza that we made for dinner instead of just letting her talk and say, yeah, that is really disappointing, or letting myself be just disappointed for a while.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the greatest gifts that we can give our kids is them seeing us feel and helping them see that it's okay to feel those feelings. One of the things that we want to be careful of is making sure we're doing that age appropriately so that we don't, one of the mistakes we can make is putting too much emotion on our kids where they have to be the ones where they have to feel like they have to take care of us.
Right.
We want to make sure that we are the adult, that, that if we're overwhelmed with emotion, we're overwhelmed with grief, that we're either going to our spouse or we're going to a friend or we're going to a therapist and we're processing that, and that we don't put that burden on our kids, but that they do get to see that, sure, I'm sad. And they do get to see tears that, even the smallest thing, I mean, there's a lot of you that might, it was related to, I saw a lot of high school graduations or, a lot of, our daughter, she's in dance and she's missing a dance recital that she, had been preparing for months. And that was one of those things that I actually, when I realized and it dawned on me, she'd been practicing this for months and she wasn't going to get to show us, her dance routine and all that. I cried. I was like, this is sad. Like this was something she was so looking forward to. And so, but we got to feel those tears. We got to allow ourselves and be okay that this is how God designed us. This is how he wired us. Because if we don't feel those feelings, as Christi was mentioning earlier, our inability to feel those feelings, those negative ones, or if we suppress them, what ends up happening is it's shutting down the opportunity to feel joy. And so, we're getting together in a couple weeks. What we're doing is we're just going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and put together a little dance recital for our daughter and have her be in the backyard and just, show us her moves and put her little, outfit on and we're gonna make it a big deal for her and hope to buy her flowers and I want to redeem it. But I think so much of what we have to do is we have to realize that there are expectations that we have in life. You were expecting the conferences, you were expecting to go connect with your friends and fellow speakers, and which I totally get and appreciate and relate to very deeply. And at the same time too, like we got to grieve that because we were expecting it. So let's grieve it. And then let's turn that expectation back to how can I redeem this? As you said, you were talking about hobbies that you've picked up, and I started picking up. I'm doing some Legoing, and I'm learning, teaching myself the piano while I'm in this time.
That's
because
awesome.
I want to find new ways to strengthen my own emotional health, and those are ways to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the point too about how it's not okay, like to feel like we always have to shut down those emotions. And I grew up with my stepdad, who was a Vietnam veteran, and he never talked about it. And I know he had PTSD, but it was like I always refer to him as the silent figure in the lazy boy. So he was there. He was watching sports. I remember a couple family vacations, and he was my stepdad from the time I was 4 until 18. And so, he was there for most of my childhood, but laughter was very rare. It was just, he was there, you kind of tiptoe around him, and, he would yell if you were too loud or if you were too sad. And so a lot of those things I remember being in my marriage is like, I can't be loud or sad or happy and just learning that it's okay. It's okay to experience those things. And still now, he's not married to my mom anymore, but he's so secluded, and I'll call and check on him. And it's hard when you see someone who has just shut down those emotions. And just growing up that way, I just like, okay, it is okay to have emotions.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And Trisha, I hope people hear that. And, whether they had that, that stepdad figure in their family, maybe, or a very different, maybe there was anger, maybe there was a lot of, maybe there was depression or a lot of sadness present. Maybe we all come from very different home environments that unless you lived in it, you don't really know what it was like. So we all kind of harbor these sort of quiet histories, really, that we are carrying around with us. And it's colored the way we see life now. It's just like you said, it colors the way we do marriage, the way we treat our kids. And I think this is such a sweet time and a gift of a time because it allows us, it's exposing a lot of that stuff because we're not getting breaks, right? We can't get away. There's no getaway. There's no time apart where we can kind of recalibrate. So it's actually showing us a lot of why do I get so angry when they this? Or why is it my daughter's sadness make me it feels so big to me. And so often it's because it's colored by a part of our story.
Right.
And so, especially, when we're talking about kids, what we often find is that when you have a child that's dealing with, say anxiety in this season, what we can often, if that has been a part of our story in an unhealthy way, maybe it was the volume on anxiety was really loud in our home, or maybe it was completely shut down. This is not something you talk about. You just deal. It's not okay to be fearful. That's not okay. If that's a message that we've received, it's going to alter and magnify the way we respond to our kids' emotions. And when they could just be feeling a regular run-of-the-mill feeling. It's just fear. It's just anxiety. But to us, inside us, it feels so big. And I think if we can allow ourselves to get just a little curious and not afraid of it, because I think so many of us get so afraid that we're I'm going to have to go to therapy for years to figure, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to think about it. I just want to move on. Or the other knee jerk is it's just who I am. It's just the way I am, but if we could just get a little curious is what I think one of the most helpful words, because it just allows us to be I wonder why. Why is it that upsets me so much when she's anxious? What is it about that? Because it's often pointing to part of our story. And then it also helps us address our kids' anxiety in a very different way because we're not overreacting or underreacting to it. We're not dismissing it or punishing it or minimizing it, but we can just let them sit in their fear or anxiety. And like we said before, without having to fix it, without having to come in and problem solve it for them, they can just feel a little bit of anxiety and we can talk them through I feel that too sometimes. In fact, and we can share a bit of our story or our history with it. And it takes a lot of the pressure off where we, I think, have put so much on ourselves as parents, as the ones that have to be for our kids what we didn't have or solve for them what wasn't solved for us. And it's not our job. That's God's job.
That's so good.
And that's the freeing thing.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm in a therapy session again right now. But because I was thinking about, because God brought me this realization to me a couple of years ago, because we have a lot. We had at one time 11 people living in the house, a lot of noise, a lot of loudness, and it would just stress me out. Even if it's laughter, they're goofing off, just the loud noise of all the kids. And I realized because we had to be so quiet around my stepdad, because, it would just, because he couldn't handle that. It would stress me out. I'm like, wait, they're laughing. It's okay. It's totally okay that the kids run around and they laugh. And, I'm not going to get stressed out. And it was me going back to that realization, just like you were saying, we have to look back on why is my kids' laughter making me really anxious or stressed out right now? And taking, like you said, just being curious about going back and thinking about those things and praying about them. And God is so good at, helping and revealing those things. And I think another thing that's super helpful that I found with my kids is having them write down, like even just what they're doing in the day and, what they think about it and what they're feeling about it. And I created for my kids and actually just threw them up on Amazon last week, stay home journals that they can say like what today is, what they're doing and how they feel about it. And
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, they are kind of keeping a memory of what's happening during this time when everybody's home. They are able to say like what they're thinking about and feeling. And then they're also getting writing practice, which is bonus for us homeschooling parents.
You're like, you just think that way. I love it.
Yeah.
That's so rich though. And we don't realize, like, we underestimate the value of that. And we do it for ourselves too. I mean, how often, do you kind of hear tongue in cheek, but you go to counseling, they're like, do you journal?
Yeah.
And people kind of make fun of that. It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's putting in words what we can't say, what we can't, it's too confusing when it lives inside our own brains. It has to get out either on paper or to a person.
Yeah. And I always say, when they're, I learned this from all these wonderful therapists, but when they're just in their emotional brain, that kind of gets stuck in that emotion. But when they can move it to their thinking brain, like even writing down, this is dumb, I can't play with my neighbor. Like it's actually, they're thinking about it and they're able to write it down.
And that's the goal neurobiologically, like what's happening. I call it the binding of the book. Like our brain is designed in such a way that we get in that right side of the brain, which is the here and now experiential part. It's what I'm feeling right now. It's why our kids can go into such overwhelm, and us too as adults. But like when you think of young kids and meltdowns and that type of thing, when we try to lecture them in that moment, they're not going to hear it because they're not thinking straight. But when we can, Christi, when I wrote Safe House, Christi came up with the term that parenting isn't rocket science, it's just brain surgery. And part of that is because like, that's exactly what you're saying. When we have them label their emotion, whether it's through writing or speaking, it is connecting the left side of the brain with the right side of the brain. And those neurons are wiring together in the corpus callosum, which is the middle part of the brain, which is I call the binding of the book. We're helping our kids write their story by allowing them to feel and to put language to that. And it has a calming effect on their brain so that they can think straight.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So after we get off this podcast recording, I'll get your address and I'll send you a copy for your kids.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah. Oh, you're so kind.
Oh, but I've just appreciated this conversation so much. And I just love, just dealing with kids or not dealing, helping kids from hard places. I think everything that you're saying is so applicable. And again, I felt like I've gone through a therapy session as Christi reminded me like, oh yeah, I remember I prayed about this and God showed me this because it's so important for us to take that time to think about why this is bothering me, what's going on. And then if we could even get a notebook and write down our thoughts, we're connecting, we're binding that book, we're writing it all down. I think it's so helpful. So we're going to have the links in the show notes to the book, both books, What I Am Feeling, and then also I'm literally going to go and order Safe House. I have not read that yet. It seems like the book I need right now. It's awesome. But we'll put links to your podcast and everything else that you guys are doing. I noticed I was on your Facebook page. You're posting some great stuff there. So I just appreciate the way you're just helping families and just helping us to be able to make the best of this time, to use it, to bring us together, to, build that foundation, and really to bless our families during this time. So thank you guys both so much for that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all that you're doing. And we're going to be tapping you pretty soon because we're homeschooling now.
Oh, yeah, I know. We're going to be exchanging information after this. I just know Christi and I are going to.
We were like tiptoeing, and now we're like, oh, we're swimming in the pool. Okay, we're in.
Awesome. I would love that. Well, thank you guys. Okay, guys, that was such a good conversation. And yeah, after we stopped recording, I talked to Josh and Christi for like 20 more minutes because I love what they're doing. I love what they're sharing. I love that they're helping families know how to bring that emotional safety to homes. And the one takeaway that I think is excellent, there's so many good things, but the whole idea of being curious about our our own emotions, and then teaching our kids to be curious about their emotions is so good, that we don't have to feel like we have to solve it, but we just be curious on why we're upset or anxious or sad. Any of these emotions that we have can help us so much in our homes. And I think especially during this time, it'll help us so much. And as I was thinking about what scripture to use, we talked about, for sure, train up a child in the way he should go, but I was thinking about our emotions. I wanted to tie it into that. And I came up with Genesis 1:27, which is, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And just that first part of God created mankind in his own image. Emotions are part of the way God created us. And if we get into the Bible, we could read, there is times God is angry. God is joyful. I mean, we see all the emotions of Jesus, who is God on earth. I remember when I was little and hearing the Bible stories, and it talked about Jesus never sinned. And I thought, well, actually he did, because he was angry and he turned over those tables in the temple when when they were taxing and buying and selling with the temple sacrifices. And I'm like, he did sin. He was angry. And I just thought then that anger was a sin. I tied it over to anger is a sin, but no, it was a righteous anger. Jesus was angry because the people had turned his Father's house, a house of prayer, into a marketplace. And that was justifiable anger. And I think so many times we do label our emotions, or these are good emotions and these are bad emotions. But really, just understanding that emotion is emotion, and what we do with it can be good or bad. But God created mankind in his own image, and emotions are part of that. So that's just the walk it out verse for today. And let me just pray for all of us. So God, first of all, I just thank you so much for Dr. Josh and Christi and their family. And I pray for this new baby that's coming, that you will just be with them and for the health and the safety of their family. But also, Lord, I pray that you will just bless their ministry, that you will just bring the messages that they're sharing into the homes of families that need it, that they will learn how to bring that emotional security in their home to help kids to be healthy, mature adults later in life, Lord. I thank you so much for what they're doing, for the ways they are just training and helping parents and helping kids through this book, Lord. And I pray for all of us that are struggling with our emotions during this time. There is so much going on, the disappointment and the stress and maybe money worries and concerns about jobs, and just things are really hard on multiple levels. I pray, Lord, that we will be curious about that and then come to you. I thank you so much, God, that you know our emotions and you're not scared of our emotions, or we don't need to feel like we have to hide our emotions from you, that we can bring them to you through the pages of our journal and through our prayer, Lord. And I pray that, that we can just do that in healthy ways. And in your name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. I know that you will love to connect more with Dr. Josh and Christi. We will have all the links at walkitoutpodcast.com for the books, for their podcasts, for all that they're doing. And go and connect with them. Let them know that you heard about them through this podcast, and let them know what a blessing that this conversation was to you. Also, I did mention those stay-at-home journals. They are available on Amazon.com, and I will also have the links to those on the show notes. So walkitoutpodcast.com, you will see the graphic for this episode. And if you click through and look at the show notes, I will have links to the journals. I have a link to a free journal if you want a printable one. It's 40 pages, black and white, a color cover, but black and white, that you can print up on your own computer, do with your kids. I would love for you to download a copy of that. The link will be there for that. But also on Amazon, we have lots of journals, and it all started with my kids who all liked different animals. So we have llama lovers and puppy lovers and corgi lovers. There's 2 different corgi journals. We have kids that love horses, and then I have a niece that loved a llama, so we have different llama options. We have a friend of mine, her daughter loved narwhal whales. So after Little Sailor, I created a narwhal, and pretty soon people were asking for all kinds of different animals. And so there are over 25 journals that with the different covers for your kids, and they're super simple. Basically, it has the date and what happened today and how I feel about it. That kids can get that. Bind the book, like Dr. Josh says, where we can connect that emotional part of the brain with the thinking part of the brain. And then bonus, it's a writing practice for all our kids that are home. So again, we'll have the link to all those things, or you just go to Amazon.com and you can search on Amazon for Stay Home Journals, Tricia Goyer, and you'll be able to see all of them there. So thank you so much for listening. Share this episode with a friend. Maybe you have friends who are struggling with their kids' emotions or their own emotions right now. Send over the link or have them search on iTunes or their favorite podcast app for this episode, Walk It Out with Tricia Goyer. And I know that it will be a blessing to them. So have a wonderful day, friends.
Thanks for listening to Walk It Out. Head over to the show notes for this podcast and all past episodes at www.walkitoutpodcast.com. If you love the show, share it with someone you know who can make a radical difference in the world. We love new friends. See you next time.